0818 715 815.
Good afternoon. You are very welcome to Liveline here on RTE Radio 1. 0818 715 815 is the number. If you want to give me a call, you can email liveline@rte.ie, or, as always, you can contact me on WhatsApp 087 484 8888. Messages, calls, voice notes, you name it. That is the WhatsApp number. Nathan Barrett is on the line. Nathan is the principal of Stratford College in Rathgar in South Dublin, which, for people who don't know, is the only school in the state with a Jewish ethos, founded by Dublin's Jewish community originally. Nathan, you're very welcome to the show, and thanks a million for chatting to us. When did you guys find out about the possibility that Herzog Park, which is right beside you, might be renamed?
Hi, Kieran. How are you? Thank you very much for having me on. I suppose over the weekend, to put it shortly, it came, I was reading an Irish Times, I think, digest the end of the day on Saturday, and it was at that point I first saw this headline about the renaming of the park. So I was initially surprised, as, this is something that would affect the wider community, not only the Jewish community, but the community in Rathgar as well. And so I was surprised, as I hadn't heard anything about it before.
So, for people who don't know, I mentioned where you are in Rathgar. You're quite literally cheek by jowl with Herzog Park. You share a boundary wall, I understand. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're adjacent to Herzog Park. We share the boundary wall. And as a school, as you said, in the opening, we are the only secondary school in the state with a Jewish ethos. We have a proud Jewish ethos and heritage, but we are one of the most diverse and welcoming schools in Dublin itself. We enrol students of all faiths and none, and from all backgrounds, and it's that mix of cultures and identities that is one of our greatest strengths to the school. And I suppose, we create an environment in our school where students learn to respect each other and to celebrate difference and to see inclusion as something lived, and then to be not included in a conversation about something that very much appeared as a done deal over the weekend. Was not nice. And I suppose, I'm gladdened to see the positive reactions of the weekend in the media and from our government ministers and from the Taoiseach and Taoiseach. And certainly, I think a conversation needs to be had about how something like this can get so far as to be appearing in the paper without the local community, the Jewish community, or the physical Rathgar community knowing about it.
It's a story that evolved and changed as well over the weekend. It looks like it was going to happen, and then there was legal advice that has put it on the back burner for now. They are going to talk about it at a council meeting tonight, but ultimately no vote will be taken, and then a decision would be made further down the track. So the story hasn't completely gone away, or the possibility. I'm sure as a school principal, one of your first thoughts would have been about the students and how you were going to maybe explain this and talk about it to the kids on Monday morning. Talk me through that.
Yeah, so, I suppose that's why I'm talking to you today, to get a perspective, from an educator's point of view, from someone who has the pleasure of working with young people and children day in, day out. Young people are shaped by their surroundings more than we realise, I think. And the names and the symbols and the spaces, that form a part of their daily life can affirm their place in society. Or, as what happened over the weekend unintentionally, can make them question it. And for many of our students, Herzog Park has been one of those quiet affirmations, a simple, steady recognition that our Jewish community, though small but vibrant, contributes to and fully belongs within the Irish story. And my concern would be about the unintended impact that a message of a change would send to the students who pass that every day. We work hard to counter uncertainty about identity. As I said before, our school welcomes students from not just the Jewish faith, but, we're a multicultural and diverse school, and that's what we pride ourselves on. And so it raises the question, of, not just our Jewish students, but how public decisions like renaming a park can affect a student's sense of inclusion, safety and belonging, regardless of what background they're from. It just so happens that in this case, it's one that the Jewish community and the local community are extremely proud of.
Yeah, we're regardless of faith, we're a parochial people, and we very much wrap up our identity in where we're from. And it's not just Herzog Park. I mean, in that part of Dublin, there are other places, there are streets, there are buildings that are suggestive of the Jewish history of South Dublin, aren't there?
Yeah, completely. Interestingly, when you think about it, it is the only, I suppose, locality, within Rathgar and certainly the other suburbs around it. We've the two Jewish schools. We have our Chabad, our Jewish deli, the Jewish bakery. We have two synagogues at the minute, So within the local area, there's a history and a heritage there that seems to have been completely, almost forgotten about when this had been coming to this decision. And, for us in the school, young people's feelings matter, their sense of belongings matter, and decisions that are made by people in the city council. These are people that, to all intents and purposes, our young people, they don't know who they are. They know of Dublin City Council. They don't know who the individual people that would make these kind of decisions are. It's that part that makes our students and certainly the community at the minute feel not listened to feel undervalued, and to feeling vulnerable at this time.
You said a moment ago that you'd worry about the unintended consequences of this for some of the students. What do you mean? What might some of the unintended consequences be?
Well, I suppose it comes back to, it might just, it's the emotional weight, and as I said before, it's the quiet symbols or the quiet, signs of inclusion, of how their heritage and history of the Jewish identity remains in the locality. The park itself is a subtle and important affirmation that their heritage is recognised and respected in the wider community. So things outside of that, this is a community who are feeling vulnerable as it is. And we take pride in our school being a place of safety for all our students, as I said, but in particular at this time for our Jewish community. And anything that would undermine that feeling of safety or inclusion, would have to be pushed back against.
Stratford College, we describe it at the start of this conversation, Nathan, as the only school of its type with a Jewish ethos in the country and founded by the Jewish community there. And it's very much part of the school's identity. How difficult is it, or is it getting more difficult to display that identity with pride in Ireland?
Look, I suppose I can't comment on how the community feels. I would stand in support of them at this particularly difficult time of the last couple of years. But we're lucky in that at the top of our page we're a secondary school, and we're a school that is there to provide an education for our young people regardless of their background and faith. We're a school of safety and inclusion and diversity. So we would want all of our students to feel that they can express their identity in a way that they feel comfortable with. But, yes, it would be untrue to suggest that, I haven't heard stories of anti-Semitic behaviour against our students, these deeply troubling stories of how students, may not feel that they can, wear symbols of their faith or to express, themselves in their native language, and these are happening outside of school, thankfully. But, they're happening online, they're happening in places where we can't protect them. And, it's part of a wider conversation just around how we can be protecting our young people, not just on social media, but out there. But it's troubling, is how I would describe it. It's troubling that students and young people, feel that they can't express their identity when they leave our school. Sometimes. That's
awful. It's actually awful to hear that, that somebody would have to hide who they are.
I completely agree. And, as I say, thankfully, it's a small cohort, but it's a cohort nonetheless, of students who have been on the receiving end of this. But, they're young people, they're resilient, but they are young people, they're children. 90% of the people on our campus are children. We have a national school, we have a secondary school. By the time they reach the end of the secondary school, some of our students have reached the age of 18, but the majority, whether they like it or not, are technically described as children. And they feel these things deeply. They feel their identity, they feel their culture, their heritage, whether it's that of the Jewish culture and heritage or whether it's not. But when a part of their heritage, especially one so close to the school in this case, is considered or, might potentially be removed, it can certainly amplify that feeling of vulnerability that already exists.
It stands in real striking contrast, what you say, doesn't it, to the prevailing narrative at the moment is how for example, the Irish language is very much in the zeitgeist, and people are embracing it as a sense of expression. And to hear at the same time in the same Ireland, in the same country, maybe sometimes in the same streets or in the same buses, that people maybe are not kind of speaking in Hebrew or not typing it on their phone in case somebody looks over their shoulder and sees it. It's a really appalling vista, I have to say.
It is. It's troubling. It's upsetting, for the young people of our country. And as I said before, whether it's the Jewish students or the non-Jewish students, we have a hugely diverse student body, and I would hate to think that any of our students, would ever feel that way about expressing themselves or their background or where they come from, But it's actions like this, though, that just highlights the lack of understanding, or the lack of empathy with this side of this small community within our country.
And listen, you're a secondary school, so I'm absolutely not going to ask you to weigh in on any political issues. But the debate and the discussion around this is predominantly political most of the time. That's what people are talking about, contemporary politics. And it's your contention ultimately, is it, that you would like people maybe to be a bit more mindful of other aspects, other people who are impacted by this? It's not just a question of contemporary politics. It goes much deeper than that. This is about a community. It's about identity. It's about inclusion. It's about all those other things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a school, as I said before, regardless of what our ethos is, a school, it has to be a safe place. It has to be an inclusive place. It has to be a place where students are respected, they're protected, and they're allowed to flourish. It affects the young people in my care. It's my duty, first and foremost, to ensure they feel safe and valued every day. And as I say, we're not going into anything on the international side. I'm talking about the impact that local decisions can have on our children's sense of belonging and identity. And regardless of faith or background, we must ensure that they feel secure and respected in the place where they learn and they grow. And that place just so happens at the minute to be in Rathgar. This is just an example, but overall, this is somewhere that students have to be protected. They have to feel safe, and we foster this inclusive environment every day in our school. And as I keep coming back to, this is unusual. This is not something that we see every day. We teach our students to be respectful, to be inclusive, to listen, and those are just some of the things that we seem to have been absent when coming about to this debate over the weekend. We want our school to be that place of safety for students, which it is.
Nathan, listen, thank you so much for speaking to us. 0818 715 815 is the number if you want to join the conversation, or you can drop me an email, liveline@rte.ie. Simon Lewis is on the line. Simon, you were raised in a Jewish family, is that right?
That's correct. Hi, Kieran. Nice to talk to you. I went to Stratford National School and Stratford College. So I'm very familiar with the area. I used to hang around Herzog Park before school and after school, and played tennis in the club beside it. So I mean, it's an area that I'm very familiar with.
So it separate from the political issue of this and the debate, and we might get into that in a moment. Can you understand the concerns Nathan expresses on behalf of the students of the school, particularly those of a Jewish background, that the Herzog Park forms part of the cultural tapestry of where they're from, and renaming it almost without consulting them is unfair?
Yeah, I can absolutely see that point of view for sure. As I said, the school is right beside the park, and there are connections obviously between the school and the park. Over the years, even during my time over 30, 40 years ago. So I can see how Nathan would certainly feel aggrieved that the school wasn't consulted with at all, and I think that might have been something that could have been considered for sure.
What's your own view on the renaming of it then, given you know it so well?
Yeah, I can see it from both sides, to be honest with you, Kieran. I think, when a suggestion to rename some place is put forward, we saw it with Trinity College, I think it was a couple of years ago, with the library. Sometimes a name becomes problematic, and Herzog's name, for reasons that we're familiar with now, has become problematic, and I can see how there would be an appetite to remove that name and replace it with something else. And I heard some names going around. The other side of it is that it's one of the very few places in Ireland that is named after someone who was Jewish as well as someone who moved to Israel and became president. So I can see how removing a Jewish name is highly problematic, but I can absolutely see the reason why it would be done as well. To be sitting on a fence, I think that's where I'd be. So I think if the park was to be renamed, if it has to be, that it might make sense for it to be renamed to a different Jewish name. There's plenty of Irish Jewish people throughout history who have made significant impacts. And I'm just thinking off the top of my head, Estelle Solomons would have been involved in Cumann na mBan back in the day. David Marcus lived in Rathgar. He was a famous Irish writer and also was responsible for most of our Irish artists through his work. And there's plenty of others. So I think that's where I'd kind of probably be sitting if I have to be truthful on it.
Why is the name Herzog Park problematic?
I think, I suppose, similar to, I guess, where, how particular names become problematic. So going back to Trinity College, the Berkeley Library became problematic because Berkeley was seen to be insensitive to people of colour because of slave ownership and so on. Herzog seems to be part of the story of the Zionist story of Israeli occupation, and currently, that has become problematic. I mean, I know that it's still a hot and controversial issue, but that is why, really, in a nutshell.
But the argument made around the Berkeley Library is a similar one that could be made today, which is that I mean, if we demand purity from all historical figures, we'd have nothing named after anyone.
Yeah, I think it's a good point.
Yeah, which isn't to suggest that the kind of the George Berkeley issue is one of just moral purity, but that it's a slippery slope that you start on.
Yeah, and I think one of the councillors, I think it was the only councillor that objected to the proposal there over the weekend, has that view that we can't erase history, and I would have absolute sympathies with that view. I don't actually have a strong stance myself, to be honest with you, on the erasure of history and so on. That kind of line of argument, I can see it, but I can also see the other side where if a name is problematic.
It is the slight erasure of him, though, from Irish history, isn't it? And whatever people think about what he ultimately ended up doing, and the nature of that kind of conquest of mandated Palestine and everything, he is a historical figure and a figure of consequence. Absolutely, that can't be debated one way or the other. And were we to remove the name of the park, I mean, future generations would grow up not knowing anything about. There'd be no acknowledgement of his connection to this country or who he was. So it on some level, it is an erasure, isn't it?
I guess so. I mean, there's many ways to remember people. We don't have.
But nobody's suggesting an alternative way to remember him. Everybody, as far as I can see, is just suggesting get rid of his name.
From that park, I mean, he if you read any book on Irish Jewish history, and there are some of them out there, his name is featured in all of them. He is the only name, as far as I know, actually, he's the only named Jewish person of a public space. I know Shalom Park exists in Cork City, and Gerald Goldberg, who was the first Lord Mayor of Cork City, has he's a bridge with his name on it, but I think that's called the Trinity Bridge. So I think it is the only one with a Jewish person's name. But we have, I guess if we were to remove his name, I think it would make sense to replace it with a notable and maybe less problematic Irish Jewish person. It might be, it just might be a compromise if this is deemed to be problematic.
Would that not expose us to the charge of tokenism, that we've got a Jewish park? You know, we're going to take the name Herzog off this park, but we'll put another name of a famous Jewish person on it, as opposed to just saying let's leave it as Herzog Park. But if there's all these other people from the Jewish community in Ireland who've contributed to the to life in this country and to the history of this country, why not name other places after them?
It may very well. Again, it's a fair argument. You know, again, I guess I think, you know, we have a park with a potentially problematic name, and but it's so problematic that simply erasing it is going to, you know, potentially be seen as an anti-Semitic gesture. But you know, also it's seen from the other side of things as absolutely not being anti-Semitic, just a problematic name. So, you know, I think it goes beyond tokenism in this case. I think if it's going to be removed, it would have to be another Jewish name, because, I mean, I think the action of removing a Jewish name is quite a big thing to do. And it being the only Jewish name is an even bigger thing to do. So yeah. I don't know if it would fall into tokenism.
Have you experienced any uptick in anti-Semitism, Simon?
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. I think I could have safely said I never experienced anti-Semitism until this decade, and I'm not sure if that's just linked with the rise in sort of anti-everything stances that seems to be going on at the moment. But I certainly have had online abuse. I notice in subtle things people might be less, you know, it's more subtle sort of stuff, you know, not talking to me about things but
like what type of things?
Mainly, you know, if Israel and Gaza comes up, there's almost an assumption of the stance I might take, and therefore, you know, I'm better not include in the conversation, or if I even talk about it, you know, the conversation dying off. But I mean, I have had very overt sort of stuff with people, you know, telling me to, you know, get out of the country and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I think anyone from a minority background gets that all the time. It's just there's been an increase in it, marginally, not massively, but you know, I've definitely thought, okay, I'm definitely more vulnerable than I was, let's say, as someone who comes from a Jewish ethnicity than I was a decade ago.
And how does that sit with you?
That's not nice. I mean, I work in education like Nathan, and you know, I live my daily life ensuring that every single child that I interact with is cared for, is included, and their identity is respected. So, you know, to find myself as someone who's also one of the very few minorities in the teaching game, you know, to be slightly vulnerable, isn't a great feeling, to be perfectly honest. But you know, it kind of is. This is sort of the landscape we're kind of living in at the moment, and are there many other minorities living in Ireland at the moment.
Simon, Kevin McGann is with us as well. Kevin, you're welcome to the show. Have you a suggestion as to what should or could happen with the park?
Well, I agree with Simon, and I can understand his concern. I mean, the one central issue here is the accusation of anti-Semitism, and that certainly could be quashed if the name was changed to another Jewish person. And I think Ludwig Wittgenstein would be a perfect name to. He's strongly associated with Ireland in the middle of the last century. He visited Ireland many times. He's got plaques to his memory in Botanic Gardens, outside Bewley's Cafe, outside Barry's Hotel, and again, his association with education.
So you have to, Kevin, you have to forgive my naivety here, my lack of knowledge. Who is he?
He's argued to be the greatest philosopher of the last 200 years.
All right,
and he's
kind of thrown a bit of shade at me there, but anyway, he's this renowned philosopher.
Have you heard of Bertrand Russell?
Yes.
Yeah, well, he's the protege of Bertrand Russell.
Okay.
And argued to be the greatest philosophical mind. of the last few hundred years. And a name like Wittgenstein and his association with Ireland, I think, would be a wonderful badge to put on Ireland, that we are proud of our links to our Jewish friends. And because obviously Herzog is a name that is associated at the moment, we feel, with imperialism and colonialism. And that's, some people would agree with that, some people would disagree with that.
Herzog was Irish, though. Ludwig Wittgenstein just visited Ireland, it sounds like.
He had very, very strong links to Ireland. His very, very close friendship with Professor Con Drury is well reported and written about. There are various experts in the UCD and in Limerick who are experts on Ludwig Wittgenstein. They would be better placed than I for telling you how important the name Wittgenstein is to Ireland. And he is barely remembered here, but using Wittgenstein's name and respecting that name might solve the problem. And I think is this not a version, Kevin, though, of, and bear with me, but of a very mild iteration of anti-Semitism, that we're lumping these two people together because they're Jewish. Herzog was Irish, like he was actually born here. Like the park is named for him because he's Irish. Yes, but we can't. Things are associated, whether it's right or wrong. We associate things with other things. And at the moment, his name is being associated with imperialism and colonialism. And we must address that. And the City Council have an obligation. Our public parks reflect, our public spaces reflect our society, and our society needs to take that on board and respond to our time, because that's what we all must do, is respond to our time. When you hear, Kevin, stories like, Simon talking about his experience of anti-Semitism, or Nathan talking about, kids in the school being nervous about displaying their Jewish identity, whether it be, the Star of David on a necklace or a brooch or something, or using Hebrew when they're out in public. Does that worry you when you hear stories like that? It does. It saddens me. It saddens me a lot. And I think that Ireland needs to strengthen and promote our Jewish friends, and naming a park after one of the greatest minds argued to be, I think would be a wonderful move. And it would help all, I imagine it would. Simon and Nathan could offer their thoughts on this, but I would imagine the positive association with a Jewish name like Wittgenstein would help the Jewish community here. 0818 715 815. If people have a view on this, if people are of the Jewish community or of that background, or if they've just got a particular view about Herzog Park, if they're from that part of Dublin, they use the park and they've got a view on the changing of the name, I'd love to hear from you. That is the number if you want to give me a call. Like I said earlier as well, you can reach out on WhatsApp 087 484 8888. We'll be back after this quick break.
LiveLine with Kieran Cuddihy.
0818 715 815, the number if you want to get in touch with us here on LiveLine. And Colm is on the line. Colm, you have a suggestion for an alternative name, I understand, for Herzog Park in Rathgar.
Yeah, I mean, I think Monsignor Hugh O'Flaherty, a great Kerryman, would be a great contender. I think he stood up to the fascists, to the Nazis in Italy, and he at huge cost to himself and risk to himself, he saved a huge number of Jewish people and got them out from the clutches of the fascists. And he a lot of people at the top end of the Catholic Church kind of gave him a hard time about it, and they had done very little really to stand up to the fascists in Italy and in the rest of Europe. And he kind of put his career on the line and his life on the line to save Jewish people. So to me, he really exemplifies what I think most Irish people feel, which is that, we're hugely anti-fascist. We want to, we stood up, probably not as many as should have, and as the Hugh O'Flaherty, against anti-Semitism. Yeah. So where to me he's Irish and he should be honoured, and he's not honoured as much. I'm from Kerry originally, and he's usually honoured in South Kerry, but people need to know him. I mean, he's the Irish Schindler, really, and I think he's a perfect representation of what we stand for.
The Vatican Pimpernel, I think. Gregory Peck played him in a movie, and Joseph O'Connor wrote
a
great book about him a couple of years ago, My Father's House, a novel, but this was the context of it. Fionnuala's with us. Fionnuala, what about that idea?
Sorry, say again, Kieran?
Well, what do you think of that idea, renaming Herzog Park after Monsignor Hugh O'Flaherty?
Oh, okay. I'm not sure. I guess, well, firstly, I'd like to compliment the show on opening, with this topic, and also, just the first two speakers, I just thought they had such balanced perspective, and I think, to be honest, I just find the whole thing very refreshing. So I don't have a specific person or anything like that. I guess I'm more interested, maybe, just maybe saddened and concerned about how, a debate, and obviously the one now is about Herzog Park, but how just what's happening at the moment can have unintended consequences for minority groups, particularly the Jewish community. And I think also, as an Irish person, just for democracy as a whole, and I guess I think that, whether consciously or unconsciously, I think that there is a move towards anti-Semitism in Ireland, and I think we're suffering from that internationally. Yeah. And I think it's a bit of a Trojan horse, to be honest, and unless we bring about reasoned debate and make space for people to have conversation, to be curious about different perspectives, that unless we have that, I just feel that that it's a Trojan horse, and that our beautiful and fragile democracy is at risk.
Brendan Butler
really,
is with us.
That's what I want to say.
Yeah. No, and it's well said, Fionnuala. Brendan Butler is with us. Brendan, do you share those fears? Is this a Trojan horse for anti-Semitism?
Yes. Well, I'm involved very much in Drumcondra for All, in welcoming all refugees and asylum seekers to Ireland. And so I envisage an Ireland that's very inclusive. But what I find difficult now is being very much on the Palestinian, promoting Palestinian statehood, etc., is that when you criticize something to do with Israel, you're accused of being anti-Jew. And also with the park now, Chaim Herzog, the person after whom the park is named, it's not so much a contributor to Ireland, is that he's famous in Israel as being very important in the 1948, the insurrection against Palestinian people, and he was very much involved in the organization of the displacement of thousands of Palestinians from their homes. And also he was involved in the formation of the Israeli Defense Forces, especially the military intelligence.
Yeah.
And that's where he's famous. And that's fine with me. But there's no particular reason why I should commemorate him here in Ireland. And the fact that he is a Jew, or he was a Jew, is insignificant. Now, I know, as that last person was saying, there may be unintended consequences, but the anti-immigrant sentiment in Ireland is huge at the moment, and anti-Semitism is a part of it. But I don't want to be associated in any way being anti-Jewish, and I welcome all the Jews to Ireland as all immigrants. But in this particular instance,
well, what do you think then, Brendan? Sorry, and I appreciate the point. You've got issues with the background of Herzog and his activities in that part of the world, and mandated Palestine and everything. But what then do you say to Jewish people who have made their home in Rathgar, whose home has always been in Rathgar, and they say changing the name of the park makes me feel unwelcome? You say you want to welcome every Jewish person to Ireland, and want Jewish people to feel welcome in Ireland, and they say, well, changing the name of the park, that makes me feel unwelcome. What then do you say?
But if they would propose an alternative Jewish name, that's fine.
Well, they do, maybe some of them don't want an alternative. They say changing the name full stop makes them feel unwelcome. Is that not? Is there not? And this is all just a question of opinion, and everyone's entitled to it. But it's just the argument that you want everyone to feel welcome. I mean, it crashes slightly on the rocks of people saying this makes me feel unwelcome.
Well, that is a problem for the people involved, because the objective behind this is not to be, even in any way, anti-Jewish. It's anti-Zionist. It is that this person was a Zionist, and therefore, even among Jews all through America, I'm involved with one group, and they would say Jews are not Zionists, and they dissociate themselves completely from that.
Yeah,
and it is very difficult.
And conflating one with the other is anti-Semitic by its very nature. Listen, Brendan, I hate to cut across you. We're tight on time. I appreciate you getting in touch. 0818 715 815. Back in a moment.